You can now find me on RoadStr, the app connecting people through cars. Hello everybody, today on the channel I'm facing one of my automotive prejudices. Today's vehicle at its heart is a 25th anniversary Mazda MX-5, one of the third generation NC cars, and amongst Mazda fans, those are generally the less well regarded of the breed. Typically, people cite the increased size and weight and poor handling of this car versus its forebears as a reason to show it just a little bit less love. However, all of the examples that I've been lucky enough to experience have in fact been brilliant, including both standard and modified examples. In fact, it's a BBR Super 200 based on this generation of MX-5 that's probably one of my favourite sports cars ever. That took the standard cars relatively lowly, 160 odd horsepower, up to a much more generous 200, and in the process turned it into a real S2000 rival. For me, that car felt like all you would ever need in something like this, but for some, that's still not enough. And BBR made their name not with their naturally aspirated tuning packages, but with their turbo conversions, something they've offered, I believe, on all generations of MX-5. I will admit that I have always been rather skeptical when it comes to turbocharging a car like this, because I believe that the purity of something as light and nimble as an MX-5 will be lost with this kind of forced induction. I've always much preferred the idea of either supercharging or simple, old-school, naturally aspirated tuning. At long last, thanks to this car's owner Stephen, I am finally able to test whether I was right or wrong. This car is currently running BBR's Stage 1 Turbo kit, one of their most popular upgrades. This car was actually purchased 2 years ago with BBR's Super 200 kit already installed, but he decided he wanted a little bit more and did exactly what I would do. He went for their Super 225 kit, which includes a set of ITBs, individual throttle bodies that give the car a little bit more power, response, but also add quite a large dose of noise. Unfortunately, it was the added noise that caused a little bit of a problem, because he's been using this car to commute, and his neighbours weren't particularly happy with the throttle body setup, nor was he, because on longer journeys it could be a little bit unpleasant. Seeking an alternative, he went back to BBR, who offered this turbocharged setup. As it happens, out of the box, with the regular exhaust system on it, the turbo is actually quieter than a standard MX-5. This one has gained a little bit of the volume back, courtesy of what's called the Sports Touring exhaust. I'm told there are several different options depending on how raucous you want it to be, but this one I think sounds to me just about perfect. On a dyno, this car made around 278 horsepower, around 110 clear of this car's original power figure, and it does that with only about 7 psi of boost in it. Torque is also up, though not by quite as much over stock. It now has 210 pound-feet, and BBR are keen to point out that it provides more than 200 pound-foot from as low as 3,000 RPM. The idea being you now have more power more of the time. Peak, though, is still at over 7,000, meaning it should still be an engine that you can enjoy revving out. The only other modifications to this car of note are the fitment of a set of Coney dampers, as per BBR's recommendations, with BBR's own custom springs. So then, time to find out. Is it actually any good? you know something? It really is. Turbo lag is barely perceptible. In fact, I've hardly felt any. The car really does have a good spread of power all the way through the rev range, and if anything, I'd say this is actually really highlighting a weakness in the MX-5's chassis, because the car feels super alert, super darty, to the point it's maybe a little bit uncomfortable in sections. The car has been set up for fast road use rather than track, because that's where it's driven. I know a lot of people are always tempted to go for a sort of half-road, half-track setup, when, if they were honest with themselves, that's not the proportion they really do their miles in. If you are driving a car mostly on the road, I think you should just go for an all-road biased setup. You're going to end up with something a lot more enjoyable. Speaking of which, there is a lot to love about this car before you even get onto the modified bits. I think this generation of MX-5, particularly the later ones, actually look superb. The 25th anniversary with this soul red paintwork, this little very nice hand-painted interior insert and white leather is absolutely gorgeous. This is also the largest generation of MX-5, for which it receives a lot of criticism. However, I think that's really far from a problem. None of them are particularly big cars, but this one you actually feel like you've got some space in. The latest ND generation of MX-5 in particular does feel rather cramped, and the taller driver may struggle. There's plenty of room in the boot. This car has a folding hardtop, meaning that if you do want to use it on a daily basis, it's actually reasonably good for that. I am very impressed with this engine, and not just from a performance perspective either, because the BBR kit, they put a lot of effort in making it look quite OEM. As it happens, the kit was designed from the ground up to be fitted without requiring any cutting, drilling, or even removing the front bumper. If you're expecting this car to now have a V8-like slug of torque from low down, you're going to be somewhat disappointed. But that, for me, is not really a bad thing, because as it is, I think the tyres on this car are kind of starting to struggle with the power that it has. That's the impression that I get anyway.
The reason for the car's edgy handling could be a simple one. Commuting in rural Scotland is not without its danger, and having been stranded last year, Stephen decided that he wanted to fit run-flat tyres. Controversial, I am sure, and even he admits it's not ideal, but I do understand the thought process behind it, even though it probably has adversely affected the car's behaviour.
As it happens, if this isn't enough power for you, you can easily get quite a bit more. With this Stage 1 setup, the limiting factor is in fact the clutch. All the Stage 2 kit adds over this is an uprated one of those, a slightly different exhaust over the standard item, and a map. With that, you'll see clear of 300 horsepower. And in a car that weighs about 1.1 tons, that's quite a bit. This is a great sounding car as well. That I really did not expect. It certainly feels quick enough to me. I don't think I'd want any more power than this. If anything, I'd really be starting to explore perhaps more significant chassis modifications. This car can carry some serious speed, and you get the sensation that in greasy weather, it could go rather wrong rather quickly. Gearbox, as ever a Mazda highlight. The 6-speed unit here is delicious. Really short throw, heel and toe, just as easy as it ever was. Fantastic. This is one of those great cars that's actually making me do a rather bad job here, because I don't really want to talk about it. I just want to drive it. Wow, lovely. It does have some punch from low down, you know, it really does. It's deceptive, doesn't throw you back. Well, those dampers actually do really well. That's quite a nasty little section there where two pieces of tarmac just meet and they're mismatched by an inch or two. You barely feel it. This is maybe one of the problems with this car, is it's now got the amount of power where I feel like stiffening it up could actually be a good idea. Give you that little bit of extra confidence in the chassis, a little bit of extra faith in the car. I feel like it wants to be a little bit broader, take up a little bit more tarmac, but then if you go down that road, you kind of start to lose the delicacy, the feel, the poise of this car. That turbo, for those interested, is a Garrett one, and BBR themselves say it is capable of about 360 horsepower. Yeah, really. I'm not feeling any real turbo lag, and if it is there, it's in such an imperceptible way that I might even be a little bit grateful for it. It just smooths out the application of that throttle. This is a massively enjoyable car. At low speeds, you may have heard a few pops and bangs and things. Not really such a fan of that. Your seats are quite decent, actually hold you in a little bit better than you might think from just looking at them. The cost of this kit is from around £4,000 if you're looking at fitting it yourself, or 5.5 to sort of 6.5 depending on what route you go if you want BBR to do it. I personally would always get BBR to fit it because they know best. Money well spent, I think. I did massively enjoy the V6 powered Rocketeer I drove last year. However, there's no denying that this does offer, in terms of bang for buck, much more. There are very good arguments for both, but even Rocketeer themselves said that the problem with this generation of car is that the engine is actually already quite light, so the added benefit of the V6 in here wouldn't maybe be as great as it was in the earlier cars with their much heavier 4 cylinders. If I had an NC MX-5, I think I'd go with the Super 200 as a starting point, then spend a lot of time and effort on getting the chassis just so before I went any further. BBR is a fairly well-known name within the MX-5 community, so it's one of those few modified cars you can actually sell and recoup some of your investment. BBR also do a buyback guarantee, a rather nice thing where if you have an MX-5 that's been modified by them or with their parts, they will actually buy it off you for a very good price, which is nice. I only took it to about 6,000 RPM there, and I would say it's between that sort of 4,000 to 5,000 range you really feel the added power of that turbo. I'm still of the opinion that it's very possible to ruin a car like this by turbocharging it. I'm sure many have done that, but BBR didn't. So, that's all I really need to say for today, I think. This has been rather enjoyable. The handling on this car, I think, could still be improved a little bit. I think it could benefit from a little bit of extra stability, a bit of extra security in the bends, but that's something I'm sure can be achieved. The engine modifications, though, silly pops and bangs in town aside, I like. Thanks for watching, everyone. Please like, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.